Hello, everyone. P. McGee here with another post-draft review, this time covering the Brilliant Minds League. And today we are instead going to take a look at every team in the division and provide some initial power rankings for all of them rather than just my own. So I will be the primary voice throughout this, and then others may jump into a voice call as well to either give opinions on various teams or to further explain their own, depending on who is in the channel. But we're going to start off with just a little bit of an explanation of how these are going to be ranked to give a little bit of clarity on that. We've got five different areas we are assessing teams on. We've got the type chart. So, how well the team does at getting all of the necessary types needed to have a good draft season. So, there won't be a lot of emphasis on things like ghost, ice, bug, rock. Those are not four critical types to hit. But if teams have everything, then obviously they're well off. Usually, the fairy, not fairy, fire, water, grass, and then the fairy, dragon, steel. Those are two of the three. Those are six important typings, as well as dark and ground. So those are the ones we're really going to be looking out for in this assessment. Speed tiers, we don't want to see speed gaps. We also want to see several things over 100 and ideally at least one piece above 115 speed. Um, Without that, teams tend to struggle in certain matchups or just not have the speed to close out games, things like that. Or if there are enormous gaps, so even if they do well necessarily on above 100 speed, if they're falling from 100 to 75, that's a problem too because it lets a lot of things run fat. So that's no bueno. Hazards. Teams don't necessarily need to be riddled with hazards. Two or three good rockers, something with access to T spikes, and then maybe some play with regular spikes or webs. But we're not looking for anything drastic, just enough options where a team can shine with whatever hazards they want to in a given match. More importantly, though, we are wanting to make sure that teams have good hazard control. So there are multiple good defoggers, rapid spinners, or other kind of magic bouncers, court changes, things like that, to ensure hazard stacking doesn't become a problem against them. And then simultaneously, we are concerned with their access to clerics. If they have the ability to wish pass or heal bell, things to keep their team healthy throughout a match so that they are not stuck in hyper offense mode only or being prone to being whittled down just because they can't heal pieces. And then finally, we're looking at an eye test. A team could hit all of these points, but for some reason not quite look right. And maybe it's not explainable, maybe it is, but we'll kind of take it team by team. Not putting a lot of emphasis on that, only 5 points out of the total of 40 points on the eye test. But we're wanting to make sure that, regardless of how it looks for the other pieces, a team could not be good with hazards at all or could have rougher speed tiers, but they could look really pretty on paper still, or at least on an eye test. So there will be teams that kind of shine in this regard that may not shine in all the other categories. Overall, we're assessing it with a value of 40 points. So maximum being 40, minimum being 0. No one's going to get 0. No one's going to get 40. So it'll just be everyone kind of being in between in those speed tier area or in those point total areas. So we're going to go in order with the draft doc. This is not related to the overall final order of rankings. We're just going to start from the first team on the draft doc, which is Alpha Q and his what was the team name? The Sydney Septiles. And then let me see who we have with us in chat for the moment. I believe it is just Joshua right now, so Joshua may provide some commentary as well. We will see. All right, so looking at the team, we've got Urshifu Single Strike, we've got Slowking, we've got Ferrothorn, Gliscor, Gengar, the Thunderous, I believe that's Carnot. It doesn't really matter. It's the one with the 111 speed stat, which is what I care about right now. Florges, the Charizard, Mega Charizard X, the Munchlax, and the Shedinja. So let's start with the type matchups or the type matchup chart. So we've got a really really good fire, water, grass core. We've got the water for the Slowking. Oh man, 1 second. All right, we're back. Spam.
Oh.
All right, so we're looking at the fire, water, grass core. Really good core here. We've got the Slowking, the Ferrothorn has really strong defensive pieces, and then that X-Sard has a really strong offensive fire piece. If we look at the fantasy core, so we're talking steel, we're talking fairy, we're talking dragon. We've got Urshifu, we've got Florges, and we've got again the Charizard X. So really strong in the fantasy core, really strong in the fire, water, grass core. And then if we look at a couple of other important types, namely dark and ground, again, this team does a really nice job. We got the Urshifu single strike for the dark type, and we've got the Gliscor as the ground type. So really, on paper, this team is hitting a lot of things in terms of the type matchup charts. The only notable types, I think, the only two types missing from this team are Rock and Ice, which are not typings I find overly important in draft. If the right mon is there and you can pick it up, that's great. But
Mhm.
this team really, really hits those two typing, or really hits all the typings really well. So I'm going to give it a 9. It's not got every type; it's missing a couple, and then there are a couple of weaker ones. Namely, normal is not that great with just
Yeah.
the Munchlax. And then because normal is not great, you also have the Urshifu, who is not a good defensive dark. So you do find yourself a little bit prone to ghost spam on a team like this. Overall,
Mhm.
though, really good typings.
Yeah, I agree.
Perfect. Um, and then looking at speed tiers, this is where it gets a little
Uh,
messier.
yeah, yeah, because I was about to say, I don't like, maybe it's just me, but I don't like that. Like, it's Gliscor at 95, and then it's Florges at 75, but Florges doesn't tend to run speed, so
Yep. There's like very rarely you'll see offensive floor, just it can happen, not super common. And so we have a lot of worrying speed gaps. That 95 to 75, if we're being honest, it's really 97 to 75 because Gliscor doesn't run a speed very often. There's very situational matchups where Gliscor is going max speed. It never wants to do that. And so
yeah,
we're basically dropping 95 to 75 and then 75 all the way down to 40 with the Shedinja, which you don't even count. So we're going right to 30. And then on the upper end, we've got a 100, a 110, and a 111. So these are actually fairly concerning speed tiers.
yeah,
Um, because Urshifu can run Scarf, doesn't love running Scarf. Gengar can run Scarf, doesn't love running Scarf. Thundurus can run Scarf, doesn't love running Scarf. None of those mons are happy being Scarfed that often. So it
uh,
just is a really awkward speed tier. And there's nothing in that mid range of like 65 to 85 that likes running a Scarf. So the speed tiers on this team are actually quite worrisome. I'm going to give it like a 4 because it just really isn't hitting where it needs to hit with the speed tiers.
yeah, I
And
agree.
and then the discount pieces, so Shedinja and Munchlax. Sometimes you want to use low point mons to shore up a couple of bad speed tiers. This team doesn't do that. They're not adding anything to the speed tier realms, so it's unfortunate.
Yeah,
Hazards, only 2, so this is somewhat worrying. They are 2 really great setters, mind you. We got Ferrothorn, who is very reliable at running both spikes and stealth rocks, and then Gliscor, who can run stealth rocks. But that's it. Gengar doesn't have access to T spikes. There are no webs on this team. There are no additional low tier hazard setters. So it's only Gliscor and Ferrothorn as hazard options week to week. Not
yeah,
the worst thing in the world, but it just isn't a lot of hazards to play with. Even if those monsters are both going to see play pretty much every week, it just you would want to have maybe another pocket rocker or ideally access to like T spikes or something like that, so that you can pressure a little more with hazard play in the right
yeah,
matchup. And those two are, those are 2 great hazard setters, but you want more than 2. You want like 3 to 4 mons capable of setting some hazards, in my opinion.
yeah.
So,
That's definitely, yeah, I
so
definitely agree with that.
yeah, so I'm going to give it a 3 because the ones that do set hazards are really good at it. It's just there's not enough of them. So that's kind of where I
Yeah.
stand on it. And then hazard control, cleric roles. So we've got a really good cleric with Florges. Florges is a really great Wisher, really great aromatherapy setter. So really good at doing that role. In terms of hazard control, though, that is where it is definitely a little less
Um,
than ideal.
yeah, it's only Glasgow and Thunderous that want to run it.
And
Really?
really only Gliscor, if we're being honest. I mean, Thundurus can, but like Thundurus being passive for a turn to defog is not using Thundurus very well because Thundurus is just an explosive piece. So to have to waste a turn defogging and being forced to run boots on the Thundurus most weeks so that you can come in on rocks and defog in theory is not ideal. Florges can defog.
Yeah,
I've run defog on Florges in the past. It's not very
yeah,
happy running defog. It doesn't fit its move pool well. Because
Yeah.
here's the issue with Florges as a defogger. Florges has no coverage moves now that Hidden Power is gone. Some of the most likely types to have things like Stealth Rocks and Spikes are steel types. Florges can't pressure steel types at all. So every time Florges hits the field to try to defog, the steel type can just come right back onto the field and keep resetting them. And Florges can't do anything about that because Florges can't pressure the steel type unless it has a bad secondary typing that makes, Moonblast neutral. So maybe it's like a Steel Dark or a Steel Fighting or like a
Yeah.
Steel Dragon. But if it's not any of those things and it's like something like a Skarmory, something like a Bronzong, a Registeel, something like that, it can just keep setting the hazards. And so Floor just doesn't actually provide any reliable defog because it just leaves it leaves you vulnerable to the Steelmon just coming right back on the field and resetting them. So Floor just struggles in that. And it's not an enormous concern that this team isn't great at removal, except for the fact that Xzard really
Uh,
needs defog support.
yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Otherwise, he can't set the hazards well, or otherwise he can't get onto the field safely. And this team does provide a decent amount of pivot to get him onto the field. You got
Yeah.
U-turn on Urshifu, teleport on Slowking, U-turn on Gliscor, Volt Switch on the Thundurus. So it has a lot of opportunities to hit the field. But if you can't keep the field clean, then this Charizard is not very happy. And so that's where I see it. The cleric support is there. The defog support is lacking. So I'm going to give it like a 6.
Yeah. That's definitely fair.
Eye test, which is the final thing we're going to look at here. I actually think this team is really effective in terms of being scary to prep for. The speed
Yeah.
tiers are a problem. It's going to be awkward when Amons that are 80 to 90 speed are running very very fat because they can, or when you're dealing with things over 111 that can outspeed your entire team, barring scarves. So I see
Yeah.
those being issues, but the potency on this team is really scary. Urshifu plus Slowking, stupid good combination. Slowking clicks Future Sight, Slowking clicks Teleport into Urshifu safely. Urshifu gets a KO on something because the Dark type can't switch in to ignore the Future Sight anymore. So that's really stupid effective. Charizard, if the field is clear and Charizard's able to get on the field safely from a teleport and click Dragon Dance, super scary. Thundurus can break teams. Florges in the right weeks can be offensive, and an offensive Florges is scary. It's got like a 111 or a 116 special attack. It's not to be undervalued as a special attacker. So that's a very scary mon.
Yeah. Definitely.
I just think Munchlax and Shed Engine don't serve this team. I think they're lackluster pieces that don't do anything, but the other 8 mons are really, really good.
Mm,
And I'd be
yeah.
scared to face those mons. But it'll be tough navigating the speed tiers, and then it'll be tough keeping the field clear for Charizard to be fully effective. That's kind of where I see it.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I'm gonna give it a 3.5. I think that's kind of where I stand on it. Where I like the offensive power. I wish there was more. I guess I wish it was a little less top heavy and a little better spread out, so that a couple roles were being fulfilled by the low tiers.
Yeah. That's definitely. Yeah.
And any other final thoughts you have on it?
Um. Not really, cause like you said, it's really good. Just that, like, kind of like the speed tiers and the speed tiers and the hazard move was just like it's kind of lacking. But other than that, like, its potential is very good, like you said.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. They I think finish out with a 25.5. No gauge yet on where that stands with everyone else, but that's kind of where our starting point is.
Yeah.
So next up is your team, which I'm sure you'll have a lot more thoughts on, which is the
Yeah.
Hopes Peak Deoxys, coached by yourself, which
Yeah.
has the Latios, the Sylveon, the Mega Aggron, who I love as a mon, the Nidoking, Milotic, Weavile, Serena, Volcarona, the Rotom Fan, the Primeape, and then the Type Null.
Yeah.
So our fairy, what is it? Our fire, water, grass core looking really strong. Volcarona, Serena, Milotic, very effective core. Our fantasy core of Latios, Sylveon, and Mega Aggron is also super good. So
Yeah.
those are two really good things you're hitting right off the bat. The ground and dark are both there. They're both a little fragile. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. 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 What I will say is that um my hazard move is a bit lacking still, because my only removers are Rotom Fan and Serena, if I recall correctly.
Volcarona can defog. So this is what I will say about Volcarona though with your team, and we'll kind of bounce around with the rankings on yours a little bit. So Volcarona can defog. The issue your team creates for Volcarona though is that it's almost exclusively going to be locked into heavy duty boots all season. It's going to have a
Yeah, yeah,
really hard time running any other item but heavy duty boots
yeah.
because your hazard removal, it's there, it's
But
functional, but it's not to the point where it's like this mon just comes in super easily and clears the hazards. You kind of
yeah,
have to
yeah,
create situations for them to get on the field to remove them.
yeah, definitely.
I mean, Latios can defog too, but Latios isn't that bulky, and so it's not necessarily a reliable defogger. Like
Yeah,
I said, the removal's there, so like it's not a problem per se. It's just there's no one piece where you're like, yeah, this is my easy remover week to week if I need it to be. This lets my
yeah,
Volcarona run, a scarf or a spec set because I don't have to worry about rocks that much. Maybe in the right matchup it's feasible, but Volcarona's just gonna have a hard time getting off the boots, I think.
yeah.
Um,
I
so
definitely
looking at the
agree.
type chart, what are we missing on your team? I don't see a rock. Again, not the end of the world. I don't see what is it? One, two, three, four. Well, I mean, Agron's. We'll count Agron as a rock. He starts as a rock. So, what do we got? One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. What's missing? Just Ghost?
E-
I think just
Um,
Ghost.
yeah,
So
I think so.
I'm going to give that a 9.5 on the type chart because you hit everything you want. Your two core, your fantasy core and your FWG core are really, really strong. And then you have very reliable. I mean, they're not bulky, but very reliable brings in both your dark and your ground, so you can deal with psychic spam and electric spam to a strong enough degree.
Yeah,
Speed tiers 125 to 110 to 100 to 95 with Primate, 86, well, 85 with the Nidoking, who is the more reliable bring anyway, so that's nice. Milotic
yeah,
at 80, all the way to Serena at 72, then down to Sylveon at 60. So the speed tiers are actually really, really solid. I think I would have liked to see one more piece above 100, but it's not your two
yeah. Oh
pieces that
yeah,
are above 100 are good, reliable weekly brings. Weavile and Latios have a really easy time coming week to week. And then
yeah,
Volcarona can get fast in a hurry. So you have decent speed overall and no gaps, which is the opposite of the last team. There are no gaps on this team, which is
yeah,
good and important to have.
yeah,
So I'm in the opinion that is probably a solid 8.5. I think like I said, the only thing I would want to see on this is maybe have seen one more piece above 100, just so
yeah,
that there's a little more to work with. But again, it's not that big of a deal because you have really good breakers at that 100 plus speed tier, and then a couple
yeah.
setup sweepers because technically Serena can get faster with a rapid spin into a sweep set. I have tried unsuccessfully to run Rock Polish Mega Aggron, who's super scary if you can get that to take off because he's got a 140 attack stat that gets forgotten
Yeah,
with like the 210 defense stat and all his bulk, but he's got a 140 attack. So if
yeah,
he's able to rock polish, then he's a scary mon.
definitely.
Um, Hazards. So your hazard game, we've got rocks on the Nidoking, or rocks on the Mega Aggron, rocks and T spikes on the Nidoking, and that's it. I think. I don't think
Yeah,
Primeape gets hazards.
no, it doesn't. Yeah, it does not.
So I think that is a little more concerning than the last team. I've run hazards on Nidoking in the past, just fine. In the right matchup, T Spikes is really good. The issue you have is that you're either trapped into more defensive Aggron a lot to put rocks up reliably, or you
Yeah,
just generally aren't going to get hazards up at all.
yeah. I can
Um,
definitely agree with that.
So I like what's going on with. I mean, like I said, I think Aggron's a great mon. I think it's a great stealth rocker. Like it does its job well, and Nidoking can be good at putting up hazards in the right matchup. It's just with your team being a little frail to hazards getting up and having a little bit of issues removing them. You find yourself in an awkward spot where opponents can put hazards up on you pretty easily, and you can't counter back maybe as reliably as you want to have at least equal hazards on the field. So that could be
Yeah,
an issue where you're getting stuck in hazard stacking battles where you're not winning those because you just don't have as easy to do setters. But they're there. They're functional. I'm still gonna give it like I'm gonna say like a 2.5 just because I would have liked to have seen a more reliable weekly setter than just Mega Aggron.
Yeah, that's fair. That's definitely fair.
So hazards or hazard control and clerics. We talked about the hazard control. It's there. It's functional. There is no one piece that you're free that's going to do it every week. You pretty much just have a hodgepodge of four different mons that can, and so you just kind of have to slot it onto one of those every week if possible.
Yeah.
But Serena has an easy time spinning. Serena is a really easy mon to spin. In terms of cleric role, the Sylveon is truly one of the best clerics that you can have. So it has a 95 HP stat to work with the wish so that you're passing off some really good wishes. And then I think Latios might get wish, or maybe that's only Latios. I could be wrong on that one. And then Serena might have aromatherapy. Sylveon, I know, has heal bell. So you have a really good cleric because Sylveon has a really easy time coming to pretty much every match that you want it to. So you have a
Mhm.
really good cleric mon, and then decent hazard control. I'm not going to say great. I like I said, I think it's
Yeah.
missing that one piece where you're like, yes, this is the piece. And I think so. I think or going back for just a second, Milotic. What I love about Milotic, which isn't going to get the full benefit on this team at the moment, is that if you can put a lot of hazards up, Milotic gets really scary with competitive, where defog can be dangerous, but you don't necessarily get that hazard pressure up on your side to force opponents to defog to take advantage of that Milotic ability. I mean, it has
Yeah.
it'll run Marvel Scale well all season if you need it to, but it would have been maybe nice to be able to run an offensive Milotic once or twice, and it's just going to have a hard time doing that if you can't reliably get competitive procced.
Yeah. That's definitely a fair assessment. I agree with that.
But I'm gonna give it like a 7.5 because I like your cleric. I think you have one of the best clerics, and I think you have enough functional defog where you can slot it in every week. It's just the mon you're running is maybe not going to be unless it's Rotom Fan. You're the mon that has to run defog or rapid spin maybe isn't going to have the easiest time doing it. But I think Rotom Fan is functional, which is what you need.
Yeah.
And then finally, eye test. I love you have a lot of good breakers on this team. So Latios, super scary whenever it can do anything. Weavile, super scary whenever it gets a chance to attack. Nidoking is a really scary mix attacker. I've already talked about how um, cool I think Mega Aggron is when it can set off like a rock polish set because it's a really good breaker. Volcarona can be a quiver dance away from winning games. And you have decent enough momentum to get them in. So you got Baton Pass with the Sylveon, you got Flip Turn with the Milotic, you've got U Turn with the Serena, U Turn with the Volcarona, Volt Switch with the Rotom Fan, and then U Turn or Parting Shot with the Type Null. So you have good enough momentum to get those pieces onto the field to break
Yeah.
things, which makes it really scary because Nidoking, every time Nidoking hits the field, it's a problem for opponents to switch in on that. Every time Latios hits the field, it's a problem for opponents to switch on that. Regrettably, this isn't a pursuit league, so Weavile doesn't get to run pursuit, but Weavile's still really scary mom when it can hit the field. So I think
Yeah.
all the pieces are there to have a really successful season. I really love what's going on all the way through Rotom Fan. Don't know that I love Primeape. He seems like a speed tier more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That was mainly what I was going for.
And then Type Null's fine as just a fat mon. I guess I'll take that back. I think Type Null's solid here because you have good wish support. You have good knockoff absorbers in the Sylveon and the Mega Aggron. And then if you're running competitive not competitive, Marvel Scale Milotic with a Flame Orb, then that becomes a knockoff absorber as soon as
Yeah.
you proc it. So Type Null
Mhm.
actually has more effectiveness than I thought. I think Primeape just kind of looks weird because he doesn't generally do much, but he's hitting a speed tier and, in the right situation, he can do something. So we'll
Yeah.
see what comes of it. But I'm going to give that a 4 on the eye test because I think there's a lot here that I really like. And I think it could take off with a lot of pieces every week, but you have enough bulk to work with where I'm not worried about you either. Sylveon's a really great bulky piece. Mega Aggron's a great bulky piece. Milotic's a really great bulky piece. Serena can be, Rotom Fan can be, Type Null can be. So you have a lot of offense with a lot of defense. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to give it a 4.5. All right, so you clock out at a 32.5, significantly in first place at the moment. Well done. Any final thoughts you want to give on your team? Things I didn't miss that you're trying to maybe present this season that you're hoping to achieve with it?
I'm just generally trying to try out mons that I haven't used before. So Neil King was like a personal use of mine that I wanted to
Hmm.
have because I usually use Neil King because it's more bulkier, but I just decided to go more offense and choose Neil King. So
I like it. Like I said, I think your team is really scary if you control momentum this game. In any game, I think your team is just going to decimate with it. So I'm excited to see what comes of that. Um, like I said, I think your team is really clean. Just a little bit on the hazard control end that isn't necessarily perfect at the moment, but we'll see if it becomes a problem or not. I've seen teams with bad hazard control not be bothered by hazards all season because they control momentum so well that opponents can't set them. So that might be your team as well. Next up is the Boston Ball Guys, coached by Hathor. So we've got the Mega Mawile, the Rillaboom, the Toxapex, the Halucha, the Chansey, the Mamoswine, the Hydreigon, the Zergtree, the Delphox, and the Dusclops. So looking at our Fire, Water, Grass core, we've got the Rillaboom and the Toxapex, two really good portions of that, and then the Delphox, which is technically a Pokemon, technically a speed tier. Uh, but not much else. I'm not overly impressed with Delphox. I've not seen it do anything outside of low tier leagues, so I don't have a lot of trust in that mon being functional. But we'll see what he gets out of it. And then if we're looking at the Fairy Dragon Steel core, we've got Fairy and Steel in the Mega Mawile, and then the Dragon and the Hydreigon. So I actually really like that. That's a really scary combination. I've seen them paired up in leagues multiple times, and it's just a really tough to deal with core because Hydreigon can really reliably bait in fairies to check it, but just click predictive U-turn on that, and then U-turn straight into the Mega Mawile as a breaker, and that's just horrifying. So I really like what's going on there. I think that's a really strong uh, fairy dragon steel core fantasy core going on. If we're looking at other types, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I don't see rock and I don't see bug. I think those are the only two types that are missing is rock and bug, which is
yeah.
again two not important types. If you don't have a rock, it's not that big of a deal. If you don't have a bug, it's not that big of a deal. So I'm gonna just because I don't like the fire type, I think that's a weak fire type. Um, I'm gonna ding it just a little bit, but it's not that bad of a core going on. I'm gonna give
Yeah.
it like an 8.5. And if the fire type was better, we're looking at a 9.5, honestly. But the fire type's a little too unreliable for my taste. Speed tiers are a concern, major
Yeah.
concern. So we've got Halucha, who we don't even really look at for a speed tier because it's running unburdened so much that
Yeah.
it's not really relevant. Opponents don't really prep around the 118 that much because what's the point? If it's going to go unburdened sweeper anyway, then that speed tier is irrelevant. And then we drop to 104 with a Delphox, who we're not going to consider that much because it's not going to show up at a lot of matches. And then we fall down to Hydreigon at 98, who is the first proper piece we are considering speed tiers for.
Yeah.
Nothing before Hydreigon is getting that much consideration in terms of prep. But Hydreigon will be prepped for around the speed tiers. It will force base 100 Mons to run pretty much max speed investment to outpace it. From there, we drop to 85, which is Rillaboom, who, again, we're not going to prep for too much because he's just going to click Grassy Glide most of the time anyway. He's probably going to run Adamant most weeks over Jolly. And so we're not really considering that a proper 85 because opponents aren't investing for it like they normally would. So then we drop to Zergtree at 83, who does get proper consideration, in my opinion, because he needs to be outsped if you can outspeed him. And then the Mamoswine at 80, again, you want to make sure you're outspeeding Mamoswine, not a mon you want going before you because it hits like a truck and you have pretty much an impossible time resisting its stab. And then if you can, by some miracle, resist its stab, either knockoff or Stone Edge is also going to hit you for good damage. So there's just really no way to check a Mamoswine. So you may, if anything, you want to make sure you're outspeeding it for 1v1s. And then from there, speed tiers disappear. We go from 80 all the way down to 50. Mawile does get some consideration just because you want to maybe creep a Mawile so that you can outspeed it, or maybe you're at base 65 and you don't want Mawile creeping you, so you'll run a few points to creep past a Mega Mawile. but it's not running max speed that much. It's not going to get to that 199 for max speed adamant or 215 for jolly. Really not going to see a lot of that from Mega Mawile. And then Chansey doesn't run speed for any reason ever. Why would it?
Yeah,
Neither does Toxapex or Dusclops. So these speed tiers are actually fairly concerning. There's
yeah,
nothing above 100 that justifies you prepping hard for it unless he shows that he's going to bring Delphox on a regular basis. You're just not going to prep for these speed tiers above 100. So basically, anything above 100 just needs to make sure they're creeping Hydreigon, and then things that get into the 100 and like 12 or higher can run Adamant or Modest pretty reliably because they don't have to worry about things because they're going to outspeed the Hydreigon still. So I find this concerning. I'm going to give this again a 4. I think these speed tiers are really not where they need to be, and I think opponents are going to abuse those.
yeah. I agree.
Hazard setters is decent on this
Um,
team. We've got the
yeah,
Stealth Rocks from the Mega Mawile. We got Toxic Spikes from the Toxapex. We've got Stealth Rocks from the Chansey, Stealth Rocks from the Mamoswine. So 3 good rockers. Generally the Chansey is the only one that's going to run that necessarily reliably, but Mamoswine can slot it in the right week. Mega Mawile can slot it in the right week. And then T spikes, which are really, really abusable. I would have liked to have maybe seen one more rocker, I think is what's missing here. Um, yeah, any thoughts on that?
yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. One more rock would generally been fine. Cause with Memo, you generally want to run more offense just so you can break things for Hydra, Rillaboom, and Mega Mawile, just so it can
Mm-hmm.
make their lives a little bit easier.
Yeah. So like I said, I think it's mostly there. I just think we needed one more piece that could set them a little with some reliability, like a low tier one, something in like the Dusclops, Delphox point tier range that could set rocks in the right matchup.
Yeah,
Uh, but it's not bad. I'm going to give it a 3.5 because the rockers that everything that can set hazards is pretty much coming on a weekly basis. Mega Mawile is always going to be there. Toxapex is pretty much
yeah,
always going to be there. Mamoswine and Chansey are going to come with good reliability. So you've
yeah,
got really reliable Mon showing up that can set hazards. They just don't want to.
yeah.
Uh,
Like maybe it's just me, but I feel like a Lightning Rock form would have been good here personally.
yeah, I could see a Lycanroc slotting in, and especially because we're talking the speed tier issues. Lycanroc forces some speed tier respect because I think Dusk form is taken. Midday form might be available still, and that 112 would be nice because it forces some counter prep, especially because it has some decent breaking power to it. So I think that would have been a nice piece to slot in. Offers that last extra piece of rocker to work with. But yeah, that's where it's at. It's not the worst situation in the world for hazards. It certainly won't be the worst one we come across in this. I wanted to see maybe one extra piece of hazard setting. But we get into hazard removal, which is the real criminal here on this team,
Yeah,
because we've got Defog Hydreigon and Defog Halucha, and that is it.
yeah.
Um,
That's yeah. That's
that
very concerning.
That's gonna
Like
get, and then we have Chansey, who is an okay cleric, can run it with some reliability. Aromatherapy isn't that big of an issue, but it's not passing wishes that often. I mean, you can run a wish set with Chansey, it
yeah,
can do that, but it's hard because Chansey usually has to run wish and soft boiled for itself, and then seismic toss, so it has a damaging attack. So you've pretty much locked yourselves into 3 moves, and you have to find a 4th move. So Chansey
yeah,
can be that cleric role pretty easily, but it can't be a great wish supporter, which is unfortunate. So really, this team in the hazard control cleric range is really concerning. I'm going to give it a 3 because that defog is non-existent. I mean, that is just not something that's going to be pretty to deal with.
yeah,
I see this team. The first thing I try to do is slot in as much spikes as I can slot in for this matchup. Just spike stack as quickly as possible because the only things avoiding the spikes are Hydreigon and Halucha. And
yeah,
Toxapex isn't running boots. Mawile can't run boots. The Rillaboom shouldn't be running boots. The Mamoswine shouldn't be running boots. So if I start spike stacking, that just starts sticking and doing a lot of pressure to this team. So I see them having a lot of concerns with that early season.
yeah,
Finally, eye test. So you've got a terrain setter for Halucha, which is good. Halucha wants that. I don't think Rillaboom and Halucha are the best combo. They share ice weaknesses, they share flying weaknesses, they share both being a physical attacker. So they're
Mhm.
not differentiating as much as you would want them to. I think Halucha Tapu Koko is always the best combination you can get because
Yeah,
Koko pivots, offers special attack, and they don't share all these weaknesses. But it's not a bad one. It's just not my favorite. This team is really, really aggressive on the physical side. So we've got Mamoswine as a breaker, we've got Halucha as a breaker, we've got Rillaboom as a breaker, we've got Mega Mawile as a breaker. And
yeah,
then it's pretty much only Hydreigon and Xurkitree on the special side to threaten. And
yeah.
so some things can, fairies can naturally check the Hydreigon pretty well. It has Flash Cannon access, but it has to be careful about predicting with that, and they can't really stay in on a fairy and try to KO it because it'll get one hit KO'd.
Yeah.
Um, the bulk is decently there. Toxapex isn't going down easily. Chansey isn't going down decently.
The Dusclops is there.
Dusclops is there. I think Dusclops is bothered by the fact that teams are going to be packing knockoff for Chansey pretty reliably. So Dusclops is just going to be dealing with knockoff spam too.
Yeah, that's true.
So it doesn't get, if you're going to run Dusclops, and Dusclops can be right in the right on the right teams, you want to make sure your team isn't incentivizing knockoff to be ran, and it is because you want to take away Chance's item. You want to take away Mamoswine's item in case it's a band or a scarf. Same
Yeah,
thing with the Rillaboom and the Toxapex. You want to take their items as quickly as possible. So this team
yeah,
is going to be facing a lot of knockoff pressure, and so I don't think that benefits Dusclops as well as it could because Dusclops can be a really good bulky wall. But it may struggle on this team to be that. We'll see.
yeah.
But eye test, I'm going to give it like a 3. It's got good breaking power. I just wanted to maybe see a little bit more on the special attack side or mixed attackers because pretty much everything is only going to be physical or only going to be special. The only mixed attack option this team has is the
It's
Hydreigon.
hmm yeah,
So we're going to finish it off with a 3. All right, team clocks out to a 22. It has potential. Like I said, I think it's going to be oppressed by hazards, and it's going to have to find a way to deal with that. Any final thoughts you have? All right, moving on to the Richland Raichus, coached by Emo. We've got the Megalopony, the Zapdos, the Slowbro, the Latias, the Incineroar, the Nidoqueen, the Registeel, the Whimsicott, the Cofagrigus, and then the Rotom Frost. So,
yeah,
looking at the types, the fire, water, grass, we've got the Incineroar as the fire, Slowbro as the water, Whimsicott as the grass. 3 really
yeah,
reliable mons that can fulfill
yeah,
those roles well. Whimsicott's a
and yeah,
good low tier option that can really execute what it needs to do. I've ran it before. It's got a lot of shenanigans with Trick. It has Defog, it has U-Turn, it has Leech Seed, it has Memento
yeah,
sets and Prankster to play with. So it's a really effective mon if used right, and I'm really curious to see what he's able to pull with it this season.
yeah, definitely.
And then looking at the fantasy core, so the fairy, we've got the Whimsicott
Whimsicott.
again. The Steel, we've got Registeel. The Dragon, we've got Latias. It's not the most impressive Dragon Fairy Steel combination we've seen so far, but it's not a bad one either.
Yeah, yeah,
Latias is a really reliable bring. Whimsicott can execute really well in the right situations. It may struggle to check dragons. Whimsicott may, just because it doesn't have a lot of bulk, and dragons usually have fire coverage or ice coverage. So it
yeah,
may struggle as a dragon check, but that's okay because Registeel is a really good dragon answer because it's just got so much bulk.
yeah,
Um, ground type, we've got Nidoqueen, who's a really good ground. Dark type, we've got Incineroar, who's a really good dark. And then poison type, Nidoqueen again. So the types are being hit. I think
yeah,
just rock is missing. Maybe rock and bug. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So rock and bug are all that's missing. Which
yeah,
again aren't crucial types in my opinion. You don't need those on teams. There isn't a
yeah,
ton of typing overlap. We do see double electric, but they don't share weaknesses because they're both immune to ground, which is the only weakness electric has,
yeah,
and it's weak to fighting, which Zapdos doesn't care about, and fire, which other team members checked without a problem.
yeah,
Um, And then there's the double psychic, which again isn't too big a concern because Incineroar is a really good ghost answer, as is Megalopony. Although the Cofagrigus edition may make this team a little bit nervous about ghost spam if they have fighting coverage. So a ghost type with fighting coverage, namely Focus Blast, is going to be a problem for this team to switch into because your
Yeah,
two answers to that aren't enjoying the Focus Blast, but it's not bad off by any means. Overall, I'm going to give this, I think, a 9 on the type chart. Hits everything he wants you to hit. Um, I would have maybe, I would have maybe liked to see. I don't know. I can't figure out what I wanted to see, but I think it's pretty much there on everything it needs. Maybe a little less doubling up on some of the types because I think psychic doubles up. I think electric doubles up. Maybe that's it.
yeah,
Uh, we'll give it a 0.5. I can't find a fault with it other than the
yeah.
two missing types, which again are not crucial types.
Hmm.
Speed tiers. So we go from 135 to 116 to 110 to 100 to 86 to 76 to 60 to 50. So the 100 to 86 is slightly concerning because Rotom Frost is not a reliable bring. He's
Yeah,
not going to see matchups week to week, and he's not traditionally going to be your defog piece because you have Zapdos for that. So he's going to have a hard time finding the right matchup where he makes sense over Zapdos or where he makes sense with Zapdos. And so you'll see a lot of situations where you drop from 100 to 76 pretty quickly. And so pieces in that, 95 to 80 speed tier range are going to be able to run really fat if they're not too worried about the Rotom Frost showing up. And so that might be a concern, but that's the only speed tier concern I have. 135 to 116 to 110 to 100. That's four good Mons at 100 plus that have a good amount of reliability and showing up. And so I'm
yeah,
not worried about that. Some of the lower tier ones require respect. You have to respect Nidoqueen speed tier. You have to respect Incineroar speed tier in case he goes offensive. And
yeah,
then the 50 is nice because it can do there's some interesting things that sit at 50 that you can play shenanigans with. Azumarill is a 50 speed tier, Mega Mawile is a 50 speed tier, so you can speed creep some things like that a little bit and play around with that. And so the Registeel has potential in those situations to be useful. And then a couple things at the really bottom end, but those aren't really that concerning.
yeah.
Overall, I'm going to give this an 8. Like I said, that one speed tier gap concerns me because it's really notable, and it's going to. I think he's going to have to bring his Rotom Frost early in the season to force people to respect it as a speed tier option. If he doesn't bring it early and he continues to not bring it as the season goes on, then people will stop respecting that speed tier, and so you just have this enormous gap. So if he can bring it early and make people respect it, then it's not as big a concern. But until he does that, it's the speed gap in my opinion.
Yeah.
Hazards. We've got the Nidoqueen with rocks and T-Spikes, the Registeel with rocks. The Cofagrigus has, I believe, T-Spikes, might even have Stealth Rocks. So we've got three setters. Registeel has a super easy time. Pretty much every week Registeel comes, it's going to be bringing Brox. Nidoqueen, I've ran it. I've run it really aggressively with T-Spike, so it's a really good T-Spiker. And then Cofagrigus can be good hazards in the right situation. I'm not going to
Yeah.
say I'm super impressed with the hazards, but they're there and they're solid. And they're, like I said earlier in chat today, they're at an awkward amount where you have to decide whether to respect it or not. And if opponents decide not to respect the hazard brings, and that's the week he brings T spikes, and opponents are in trouble. Because what can set hazards can't set them well. Because the Nidoqueen is a good setter, the Registeel is a good setter, the Cofagrigus is a good setter. So those are three respectable setters. And if he can get opponents to bite on not bringing hazard control, then those are weeks he can really oppress with hazards. But like I said, I think it's missing maybe one more piece. So I'm gonna give it a 3.5. I wanted to see maybe one other hazard setter to go along with it, but I don't think it's a problem either, as long as he times it well when he brings them week to week. So hazard control, we've got the Zapdos with defog, one of the best defog options you can have available to you. Latias can be defog in the right situations. Whimsicott can be defog in the right situations. Rotom Frost can be defog in the right situations.
Yeah.
Overall, I think this team is actually pretty solid for hazard control because Zapdos is such a reliable hazard control piece that you don't really need to rely on others to do it very often. And if
Yeah,
you need Zapdos to go offensive, Whimsicott's fine doing it for a week, or maybe that's the week he runs Rotom Frost as like a support piece with the Defog. So I'm not concerned about his hazard control. I think it's all there and it's all solid.
yeah.
The cleric role is more of a concern for me. Latias can provide some wishing, but it doesn't have aromatherapy. I'm not sure whether or not Whimsicott does or not. And so I need to check on that. But if Whimsicott doesn't have it or isn't a good, reliable status healer, then this team is prone to things like Toxic, prone to things like Burn, especially if a Lopunny gets burned, that can be a concern. And so, or paralysis being inflicted on this team. So those are things that can impact this team if it can't reliably clear them. And I'm not sure I see that at the moment. So that's the only thing I see, because I think the hazard control is solid, and the pieces that he can run hazard control with are going to be good and reliable brings most weeks. So I would want to see it a little more on the cleric end, but the hazard control end is solid. I'm going to give it a 7, I think. And then the eye test. So I like the Megalop, Zapdos, Slowbro core. I think that's one of the scariest cores we've seen so far for the first three, because
Hmm.
they just feed into each other so well. Lopunny can U-turn, the Zapdos can Volt Switch, the Slowbro can teleport, and it can click Future Sight into teleport, which is really, really nice for Megalopony. And then you get Latias, who has all this momentum to get on the field safely and be able to spam an attack. The Incineroar can pivot as well. All of these four can pivot nicely into Nidoqueen, who is a really good mixed attacker and can break things as well, because Sheer Force Life Orb is a stupid combination. Registeel can get offensive with iron defense sets on the right weeks. I've seen it be effective as recently as last week, so I know it's something to watch out for. Whimsicott
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily oppress with physical attacks, but there are some things it can do with like sub seed sets that are really concerning to deal with. And then Rotom Frost, Bolt Beam is really effective as an attack combination. Given the beam in this situation is Blizzard, it's still a solid move. And paired with like Discharge or Thunderbolt, it can be really offensive in the right situation. So I'm really interested in how this team's going to perform. I think there's a lot of momentum to play with. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pivot pieces, and then several breakers in the Nidoqueen, the Megalop, the Latias. So if he can get that going early and show the momentum of this team, it's not a team that's going to be easy to contend with. So I'm
Yeah.
going to give it a 4.5 on the eye test, because I'm really excited about what he's going to do with it, which equates to a 32.5. So we have a tie for the top with you now. All right. Any final words on that team? Going to keep moving on and probably have to pick up the pace a
Um.
little bit.
Um. Other than the double types, I really like this team. Like
Yeah,
I just think it's just a very good team. It has good pivot. It has good hazard move. It can be very threatening. It played right.
absolutely. So on to the next one. We've got Vort. What is it? Vort Extra? Might say that wrong. The Grim Gengars by Vort Extra. No, that's right. So on this team, we've got the Mega Gallade, the Landorus, the Heatran, the Umbreon, the Blastoise, the Galarian Weezing, the Tangrowth, the Kyurem, the Raikou, and the Cutie Fly. So on the types, fire, water, grass, Tangrowth, Blastoise, Heatran, really defensive fire, water, grass combination, but Blastoise can click Cell Smash in any given week. Heatran can run Scarf Eruption sets on any given week. So those are two things that have the offensive potential. And then Tangrowth is
Yeah.
just a really good defensive wall that's going to be hard to break. So really
Mhm.
impressive on that front. If you look at the Dragon Fairy Steel Core, it's equally as scary. We've got Kyurem, we've got Heatran, and we've got Galarian Weezing. So
Yeah.
really strong cores on this team, with
Mhm.
really good ground type in the Landorus and a really good dark type in the Umbreon, as well
Mhm.
as access to poison, which can be grounded. It's not exclusively a levitate runner. So if you are concerned about T spikes, this can be a grounded Weezing to counter that.
Yeah.
So really impressed on the type front. I think what's missing here. The only thing that is missing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I don't see rock. I don't see ghost. and I don't see something else is missing from this team, and I can't tell what it is right now. Um, there's one other type missing. I don't know what it is, but Rock and Ghost aren't a big deal to be missing as types. So I'm not too worried about it. I can't figure out what the other missing piece is, but that's okay. Really, on the type front, I think this is one of the most impressive teams we've seen so far because low tier Bug is fine. He has another fairy in the Galarian Weezing, so this isn't his mono fairy.
Yeah, yeah,
Really, really impressed on that one. I think that's probably almost one of the most clean ones we've seen so far. That's easily a 9.5 in my book.
yeah, definitely.
Speed tier, we've got 115 to 110, and then we make a drop to
Uh,
95, which is concerning, then to 91, 78, 77, a drop again to 65, 60, 50. Um, Cutie Flight 84 doesn't count as a speed tier. No one's going to respect that. It's a 1 point mon. So on the upper end, I think I would have liked to have seen one more piece above 100. So the Raikou is fine at 115. The Mega Glade at 110 is really nice.
yeah,
It's not the worst situation because Landorus is a really reliable Scarfer in Draft League, has a really easy time running that as an item. So it
mhm,
may be required to run that more often than he would like, but he can get fast quickly with the Landorus, or the Kyurem is also a good Scarfer in many weeks, and so it also can run Scarf without too much issue. And then if he leans into offensive Heat Train, which I think is a really good offensive piece when people pull it out, it is a really effective Scarfer as well. Scarf Eruption is really hard to switch into for some teams because their fire protection is not that good. So he
yeah,
has the ability to get fast with some pieces, and then we still have Shell Smash Blastoise to give some credit for. He has the ability to get fast. It would have just been nice to see, I think, one more piece with that raw speed over 100.
yeah,
But it's not bad off. I'm going to give it a 7.5. It's not disastrous. It just, maybe is a little lacking on raw speed. But if he can make it work, Cutie Fly with the webs could prove to be effective on a team like this if he can set those webs once or twice this season. So we'll see if he whips that out at any point in time. All right, hazards. We've got the Landorus with rocks, the Heatran with rocks, the Galarian Wheezing with T-spikes, and then the Cutie Fly with webs. We were having a discussion in chat about this earlier. I think this is fine enough for hazard setters because the three that can set hazards are going to show up almost every week. Landorus will almost always be there. Heatran will almost always be there. Galarian Wheezing will almost always be there. So he has a reliable ability to put hazards up when he wants. I think maybe he would have wanted one solid defensive piece that could also put up rocks or spikes just so that he isn't leaning into maybe an offensive Heatran having to run stealth rocks or Landorus getting forced into defensive roles to run stealth rocks in a given week. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. I think maybe 1 or 2 games he might be in an awkward spot where he's forced to run a defensive Landorus to get that hazard up and oppress with it, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And then he's got the pocket webs, which pocket webs are always really scary on teams that you don't necessarily always want to carry defog for. This isn't a team that forces you to carry defog every week, and will be probably 3 to 5 games this season where he doesn't set hazards at all. So if he does that enough, teams won't necessarily carry defog, which is the perfect opportunity for Cutie Fly to come in and set webs. Like I said, I think I would have wanted to see one more hazard setter, but I think what can set hazards does a nice job of it. I'm going to give it a 3.5. Hazard control is not spectacular, but it's also not bad at all. Landorus can defog, so if you're running defensive Landorus that week, it's a solid defogger. Blastoise has a really easy time running rapid spin because it can rapid spin and then flip turn. Galarian Weezing has a really easy time running defog if you need it to. So all three of those
yeah,
can clear hazards without too much issue. Technically,
mhm,
there's Pocket Cutie Fly, but again, we're not going to really count that as anything other than maybe the most niche of defoggers in the right situation. But if Cutie Fly is showing up, Cutie Fly wants to put up webs, so it also doesn't want to defog. So it's not really a hazard piece, even if it technically has access. Um, so the hazard control, I think, is okay. Obviously, I think you would have liked one more low tier hazard removal option, but you couldn't really fit it in. If we get over to Cleric, Umbreon is one of the best clerics if you don't get too passive with it. So if Umbreon's really good at switching in on, Ghost, which is really important for the Gallade to have a safe out from Ghost so that it can safely click heal bell. It can safely wish. It can safely baton pass. So it's a really solid cleric option. And with the synchronize ability, it's not very easy to toxic an Umbreon because you have to be a steel type or a poison type not to get hit back with the status. So I think the overall hazard control cleric is very strong on this team. Probably one of the more balanced we've seen so far. Most teams have either had really good defog support, somewhat lackluster hazard or somewhat lackluster cleric, or a good cleric and lackluster hazard control. This team has a solid amount of both. I'm going to give it an 8.5. Like I said, I think it's just one other pocket hazard control option away from being like pretty much perfect. And then next up, we are going to look at what is it, the eye test. So, last piece of things to look at here. Um, it's got a decent amount of momentum. I think I would have wanted to see one more momentum piece. We got the momentum with the Landorus, momentum technically with the Umbreon, the flip turn with the Blastoise, and then the Volt switch with the Raikou, which is a decent amount. But you maybe want one more piece to get Gallade on the field safely because Gallade doesn't have an easy time switching into attacks. It's only got like a 68 HP stat. It's pretty bulky once it mega evolves on the defense and special defense end, but it's just not a very bulky piece in general. So you need to be really cautious about getting Gallade onto the field. So momentum moves are really, really helpful for Mega Gallade having more opportunities to enter the game and not just be a revenge killer or closer, but to be like more of a mid game threat. But overall, I really like the defensive synergy on this team. We got Heatran, who is weak to ground, fighting, and water. And then the Galarian Weezing here is immune to ground and a quarter fighting is a quarter effectiveness on him. So he really checks the Heatran weakness as well. Galarian Weezing is weak to steel and to poison. Heatran is immune to poison and only takes quarter damage from steel. So they really synergize nicely with each other, provide some needed pivoting in the right situations. Blastoise offers good bulk as well. Umbreon offers good bulk as well. Tangrowth offers really good bulk as well. But the nice thing too is that Blastoise and Heatran can be offensive in the right situation. So it's not just a bunch of fat passive pieces. You have pieces that need to be respected as offensive options as well. I'm
Yeah.
really, really excited about this team. Really top heavy in the spending. We're talking, essentially a 9-mon team with technically a cutie fly on it. So it's spending really top heavy, but all 9 of those pieces have a pretty easy time coming week to week. So it's just
Yeah.
going to be his picking and choosing on what he wants to bring, but really solid on the eye test. I'm going to give it a 4.5, just because it's a little too top heavy that he only has 9 mon instead of 10 to work with. But
Hmm.
that makes him our new total leader at 33.5. So well done to Vort Extra. I think his team looks really, really solid overall. All right, cruising along here because we need to pick up the pace. I got only 20 minutes left. All right, the St. Louis Charizards. We're going to start going through these a little more quickly, guys. On the team, coached by Charizard Ace. On the team, we've got Greninja, we've got the Zygarde, Mega Beedrill, Moltres, Chestnut, Bronzong, Galarian Weezing. That is peculiar. We'll bring that up later. I don't think he has the Galarian Weezing because I think the other coach has the Galarian Weezing.
Yeah.
We've got Lantern, we got Aromatisse, we got Lycanroc, the midday, or I'm sorry, the Dusk form, and then we've got Silvally. So fire, water, grass. We've got the doubling on water, which is really good because Greninja is not a good mono water type just because it has no bulk. Oh, I guess someone's in here fixing that as we go. So it just vanished from the team. Uh, we've got Greninja as a good offensive water paired with Lantern as a solid bulky water. So that's a good tandem. And then we've got the Moltres as a fire, Chestnut as a grass. So really solid fire, water, grass core. Not my favorite I've seen today, but also there's no objective fault to be had with it. I think it's a solid overall thing.
Yeah.
The Fairy Dragon Steel, we've got the Dragon with the Zygarde, the Steel with the Bronzong, and then the Fairy with the Aromatisse. Maybe a little too much on the passive end for that combination, but still a really effective 3. There isn't necessarily a bad one. I just don't think Bronzong and Aromatisse are going to be sharing a lot of games together. Those two will be one or the other, I think, in a lot of matchups between them. So overall solid. What I
Yeah.
like about this team, and I'm going to give it high marks for the type combination stuff, is that it has Silvally, which shores up a couple of missing types on this team. So there is no, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. What's missing from this team? no ice, no ghost, and then there's one more type I can't see at the moment that's missing. But it has almost every type, but Sylvale kind of help. Oh, it's missing normal, but Sylvale can be normal. So Sylvale helps check the last three types. You can run a bulky normal Sylvale with Assault Vest if you need it on a given week, which can be helpful to check ghost spam. Although this team isn't too vulnerable to ghost spam because Chestnut has bulletproof to check Shadow Ball. Um, and then the only other weakness that's built in is the Bronzong, which isn't going to see a ton of action. So this team isn't vulnerable to ghost too much.
Mm.
But it
Um,
has the ability to get mixed up with the Sylvale. So I'm going to give this team high marks for types. I think both the types were hit. I don't have any objective faults with the types that were chosen. So I'm going to give it a 9.5 in that regard.
yeah.
Speed tiers, we got 145 to 122 to 110, doubling up
Um,
on 95, drop to 90, and then there is a steep drop off from 90 all the way to 67, which is not a respected speed tier because Lantern doesn't run speed. And then
yeah.
64, Chestnut doesn't run speed. And then
So
we
yeah,
drop again to 33 and 29 on pieces that don't run speed. So it's good on
it's
the top end of speed, really bad after 95.
yeah,
Because basically nothing after Zygarde and Sylvale tends to run speed. So opponents are going to be really fat if they can't outpace those Mons, because what's the point?
yeah, definitely.
So I see that being a concern. There's no gaps outside of that. From 145, it's got three pieces above 100, three reliable pieces above 100, and then two solid pieces of 95. So it'll force a lot of prep on the top end, but he's going to be dealing with a lot of fat mons every week that don't need to run speed because there was no point. So I'm going to give it a 7.5, just because that bottom half is really concerning to me.
Mm,
Moving along, hazard setters, we've got Greninja with spikes and T spikes, Beedrill with T spikes, Chestnut with spikes, Bronzong with rocks, and then the Lycanroc with rocks. So nothing that loves running hazards outside of the Chestnut and Bronzong, but a lot of variety in hazard setters because you can run pocket T spikes with Greninja or spikes. You can run pocket T spikes with the Beedrill. I've done T spikes on both of those mons in the past, so I know it's feasible. Lycanroc can run rocks in the right situation. So overall, really strong hazards. I can't really complain about his hazard options. They're all there. There's enough of them to get whatever you want in a given week. If you really need to set hazards and you need a bulky piece to do it, you have Chestnut and Bronzong to play with. If you need maybe a pocket option for hazards, you got three others with the Beedrill, the Lycanroc, and the Greninja. So again, solid hazard play. I'm going to give it a 4. Maybe, yeah, I think a 4 is solid. I haven't been too high on hazard setters thus far. Hazard control, we've
yeah.
got
Um,
we've got Moltres, we've got
and
Beedrill technically, and then we've got Sylvale. So
yeah,
the
yeah,
control is a concern.
yeah. Doesn't this team get kind of messed up by spikes? In my opinion.
This team is going to struggle with stackers because you're going to be really reliant on Moltres to come check those. But if a spike stacker doesn't let Moltres come in, so if it's like a ground type that has access to rock moves, or it's maybe something else that Moltres doesn't switch in easily on, this team is in a really tough spot. I think defensive Sylvale is going to be showing up a lot this season to compensate for the lack of hazard removal.
Yeah,
Aromatisse is a solid cleric, and then you also have bonus heal bell with the lantern. So there's enough cleric roles going on where it's not going to be a huge concern in terms of keeping pieces healthy per se. You have enough pocket clerics to be okay, but the hazard control is a real concern, and this team I think is going to be pressured pretty heavily by rocks and spikes because it's very beneficial to put rocks up when you're dealing with a Mega Beedrill because Mega Beedrill can't really hit the field and eat 25% chip more than twice. So I see this team being pressured by that, and this team doesn't really eat knockoffs as well as it should. Beedrill
yeah,
doesn't eat knockoffs for anything. Uh, Zygarde hates losing its item. Moltres really doesn't want to lose its boots, otherwise it loses its potency as a checker. If you run the right type of Sylvale, it can be a knockoff absorber. So if you have like Fairy Sylvale or Fighting Sylvale, it can be a knockoff eater, but you really don't have reliability in that too often, so you have to be careful with it. So overall, I'm going to give it, I think, a 6.5 because I'm really concerned about the hazard control on this team, and I think the pieces that he has are really fragile, which makes it
yeah,
really tough to be eating chip like that throughout a game. Finally, eye test. Um, I don't know. I don't know I like Zygarde. I don't know how Zygarde's going to show on the team like this because I feel like Zygarde's going to be stuck being defensive a lot because you have two fast breakers in the Beedrill and the Greninja. And so you're going to want that Zygarde leaning into defensive roles a lot as like a subset. And maybe it won't get to shine as an offensive piece. I think there's a lot of bulk on this team, though. And there's
Yeah.
not enough breakers because Moltres is traditionally bulky, Chesnaught is bulky, Bronzong is bulky, Lantern is bulky, Aromatisse is bulky, and Silvally is usually bulky, which leaves just the Mega Beedrill, the Lycanroc, and the Greninja as solid offensive options. And the Zygarde can be offensive, but it only has 100 attacks at it. It needs time to get aggressive. So I'm going to give it
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a 3 on the eye test because I think I have some concerns about its synergy overall and the ability to maximize the Mega Beedrill play and the Greninja play. Still a solid team. Comes out to a decent ranking. Moving on to Bankler, we've got the Vicious Vikavolt, and he's got the Celesteela, the Garchomp, the Reuniclus, the Infernape, the Tyranitar, the Excadrill, the Jellicent, the Magnezone, the Xatu, and the Dodrio. So
Um.
looking at the type matchups, we've got 3 steals, which is a concern. We've
Yeah.
got 2 grounds, which is a concern. We've got 2 psychics, which is a concern. We've got 2 flyings, 3 flyings, which is a concern. A lot of type overlap. We don't
Yeah.
have a grass type,
I
and
don't
this
have a fairy type either.
we don't have a fairy type. I think this is a really concerning type matchup chart on this team. I'm not even going to dig into all the other missing ones. I don't see bug. I don't see something else on here. But it's missing pieces. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's got way too many steals. It's got way too many flyings. It's got too many ghosts or too many psychics for my taste as well. So I'm going to put this as a solid. I'm going to say 4.5. It has a couple of good steals. It has a good dragon. It has a good ground. Um, oh, there's no dark. No, there's a dark. It has a good dark. So it has some of the ones that do show up in their roles are good in their roles, but it's missing a lot.
Yeah.
Speed tiers. There is
Mm,
110 as the Dodrio, which is not going to be very respected as a speed tier. 108, which is going to be more respected as a speed tier with the Infernape. And then we drop to 92, 102, however you want to look at the Garchomp, because it doesn't have to Mega Evolve on the first turn, so it can be 102. From there, we drop to 95 with the Xatu, who we're not going to respect as a speed tier too often, into 88 with the Excadrill, who is a respectable speed tier. And then we dip again from 88 to 61 with the Celesteela and the Tyranitar, and then
yeah.
60s to finish it off with the Magnezone and Jellicent and the 30 and the Reuniclus. Really concerning speed tiers. Obviously, the Garchomp can get fast in sand, so it can go faster. We have Dragon Dance on the Tyranitar. We have Automize on the Celesteela. We have Scale Shot on the Garchomp, but it doesn't have a lot of raw speed. We're not going to see Scarf Celesteela. This is item locked. We're probably not going to see Scarf Tyranitar. So there's just a lot of concerns in regards to speed. Maybe a Scarf Magnezone will show up once, but really not impressed with it from a speed tier point of view. So I'm going to give this again. I'll give it a 5. Actually, no, I give it other teams lower, and I think this is one of the more concerning ones. I'm going to give this a 4. Hazards, that is one thing this team does a decent job of. We've got rocks on the Garchomp, we've got rocks on the Infernape, we've got rocks on the Tyranitar, we've got rocks on the Excadrill. Actually, that's it. We
Yeah.
got 4 rockers. The only one that's reliable is a rock. Only 2 that are reliable rockers are going to be the Garchomp and the Tyranitar. No
Mm-hmm.
spikes, no T spikes, no webs. And this team really needs web support, I think. So to not have webs is a concern. Um, Gonna give it again. I'm gonna give it a 2.5 on the hazard point of view. Because I think 4 rockers, I'll give it a 3. I've been critical of others. 3 from a hazard's point of view. Hazard control, we've got spins on Excadrill. We've got defog slash magic bounce on the Xatu, and we've got defog on the Dodrio. Really concerning in terms of hazard control. I don't see it. Excadrill doesn't want to be spins every week because you need Excadrill to be your speed option every week because you have no speed. And
Yeah.
then there is no cleric. I don't see aromatherapy on this team. I don't see wish on this team. So health lost
Um.
is health lost. So Celesteela can only heal with Leech Seed. Garchomp can't heal. Reuniclus has regenerator slash recover, so it can heal. technically this has slack off, but it's not going to be able to reliably run that. Can't heal, can't heal, can heal
Oh,
with the
yeah,
Jellicent. Magnezone can't heal. Zatu can heal, I guess, and
yeah,
Dodrio can heal, I guess, but those aren't good healers. So
yeah,
really concerning from a hat. Like this team is just going to be whittled down. So this is a pure hyper offense team, and if this team is ever
yeah,
on the back foot, it crumples. I don't think this team stands up to any sort of pressure at all. If it can't get back on offense, this team just falls apart. Is the way I see it.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I'm going to give it a 3 for hazard control. And then eye test, I really don't like this team. I'll be honest. Way too many seals, way too over reliant on the sand core, not good enough switch outs on the defensive end because you're pretty much relying on Celesteela and Jellison to be your primary defensive pieces, maybe some Reuniclus play, but that's not enough to feel comfortable about. And that team just, I think, is going to struggle, but we'll see what comes with it.
yeah.
All right, moving on. We've got Jack with the Toronto Talonflames. We've got the Mega Scizor, the Garchomp, the Mandibuzz, the Rotom Wash, the Blacephalon, Comfey, Terrakion, the Amoonguss, Cryogonal, Duosion, Pachirisu, and then the Persian. Speed tiers, we're looking at 115 with the Persian, which we're not going to respect. 108 with the Terrakion, 107 with the Blacephalon, 105 with the Cryogonal, 102 with the Garchomp, 100 with the Comfey, who is not really a speed tier. And then we dropped from that to 86 with the, or I'm sorry, technically 95 with the Pachirisu, who we're not going to really respect. 86 with the Rotom Wash, who we will respect. 75 with the Mega Scizor, who we will respect. And then,
It just drops to 30.
yeah, and 30. And there's Mandibuzz at 80, but again, Mandibuzz doesn't really run that much speed.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of speed on here, but it's so clustered together, it's ineffective because
yeah,
if you're 110, you just run 110 and you outspeed all of these things. If you're 100, you're not going to catch any of those things. There's what is it? One. Okay, between 95 and 108, we've got one, two, three, four, five, six. I think 5 or 6 pieces between 95 and 108. That's too clustered of the things. We would want something higher
yeah,
than this, than that. Persian at 115 doesn't really count. Persian's not going to show up more than like twice all season. So speed tiers concern me. Uh, let's do type matchup too, or types. What do we got? Our fantasy core. So we got Mega Scizor, we got Garchomp, we've got Comfey. Solid there. Fire, Water, Grass, Amoonguss, Blacephalon, Rotom Wash. Those are decent. The Pocket Ground is good. We got good ground, we got good dark, good poison. So overall, the typings are solid. Not a bulky normal, but we have a bulky dark, so it doesn't matter too much. I'll give this an 8.5 on the type matchup, but in terms of speed tiers, I'm going to give this like a 4. I'm really concerned about the clustering of speed tiers we got going on with that team. Hazards, we've got uh, rocks on the Garchomp, we've got rocks on the Terrakion, and that's it. No other hazards. Really, really concerning. So that's not going to be effective. Garchomp can run rocks. Terrakion almost never runs rocks. So we got
yeah,
one rocker all season who's going to be stuck in that role a lot. I'm going to give that a 2. Hazard control. We've got Scizor with Defog. We got Mandibuzz with Defog. We've got Rotom Wash with Defog. We've got Comfey with Defog. We got Cryogonal with Rapid Spin. Really good hazard control. Actually,
yeah,
really, really solid in that regard. We've got a Cleric role in the aromatherapy with the Comfey, which is nice to see. No wish support, which is not the end of the world. We've got a regenerator core going on here with the Duosion and the Amoonguss. We've got access to healing for the Scizor, the Mandibuzz, the Rotom Wash. The Comfey can heal itself. Amoonguss can heal itself. Cryogonal can heal itself. So it's not too bothered with by the lack of wish, and it has good aromatherapy support with that Comfey. So I don't think it's going to be too bothered on the Cleric end, and the Defog end is really, really strong. Probably one of the best hazard control teams we've run into so far. I'm going to give that honestly a solid 8.5. It's really, really strong in that regard. Eye test. Um, I like some of the pieces. I think some of them are really solid. Mega Scizor is going to be really effective. I don't think. What am I going to try to say here? I feel like Mega Scizor, Garchomp, and Terrakion clash too much with each other as physical offensive options. They're not differentiating themselves enough to my liking, but they're not bad either. There's decent pivoting on this team. We've got Scizor with U-turn, Mandibuzz with U-turn, Volt Switch on the Rotom Wash, U-turn on the Comfey, to help get Blacephalon onto the field, but not as much as you would necessarily want because Blacephalon isn't hard switching into anything. And so it's going to be a little difficult to get Blacephalon on safely. Same with Terrakion. Neither have great bulk. Neither want to be eating too many attacks. And there isn't a ton of pivoting to get them on the field. But either time they hit the field, they'll be very effective. I think I would have wanted to see one more special breaker. It's pretty much only Blacephalon. Rotom Wash can be offensive in the right situation, but it's not a reliable offensive option week to week. And then that's really it. We got maybe a special Garchomp showing up once, but nothing to rely on. I still think it's solid. I'm going to give it a 3. I think I maybe would want to see a little bit more on the special side. All right, moving on. Got to get through these last 3 as quickly as possible. We got the Charlotte Celesteelas, coached by Ascension. We've got the Tapu Fini, the Jirachi, the Dragonite, the Rotom Heat, the Landorus, which does not have Sheer Force, the Miltank, Hitmontop, Drapion, Frostlass, Lycanroc, the Midnight form, Kaimeko, who is a great Pokemon, and then the Mega Venusaur. So Fire, Water, Grass is probably one of the best I've seen today. Rotom Heat, Tapu Fini, and then the Mega Venusaur. That is the super scary, fat defensive backbone, but also has a lot of decent breaking power if not respected enough. Fairy Dragon Steel. So we've got the Dragonite, we've got the Jirachi, and we got the Tapu Fini. So 2 really great cores there. Decent dark type, decent poison type in the Drapion. Not a very inspiring ground type with the Landorus, but it's not the worst thing in the world. So I'm going to give that honestly a solid 9. Really, really impressed by those 2 cores. But some of these other pocket options maybe aren't so exciting. You know, the Lycanroc's not going to do anything as a rock type, truly. Um, a little bit of doubling up, but nothing too problematic. Miltank will be a good fat normal type, which is nice because Drapion's not a reliable bulky dark. So I do like that. Speed tiers, we go from 110 to 101 to 195 to 82 to 80 to 70 to 65. Doesn't hit a good peak, and none of the pieces in that 95 to 110 range like running a scarf either. Jirachi can in the right situation, as can Tapu Fini, but Tapu Fini doesn't have a lot of breaking power, so it doesn't want to be scarfed that much. So a little bit of concern on that top end with speed, where it just doesn't have the ability to go first, and there are no webs on this team, so it may struggle in the it may struggle to be good at presenting a cleaner for games because there's no one piece that just kind of takes off with speed. But there's no gaps either. This is not a team with gaps. It just doesn't have a high peak. So I'm going to give it like a 7. Would have loved to see one more good fast piece on there. Hazards, we've got Jirachi with rocks. We've got Landorus with rocks. We got Miltank with rocks. We got Frostless with spikes. And then Lycanroc with rocks and Drapion with T-spikes. Really solid. First team, I think, that's gotten all three of those at once. So I'm high on that. I think Jirachi's a good rocker. I think Miltank's a good rocker. I think Frostless can be a fun spiker in the right situations. And I think Drapion's a good T-spiker. I got no qualms about any of that. I'm going to give it a 4.5 because I think this team needed webs and it doesn't have it right now. So it's not a perfect score in my opinion. Looking at the hazard control, we've got Defog on the Fini, Defog on the Dragonite, Defog on the Rotom, Defog on the Landorus, Spins on the Hitmontop, Defog on the Kaimeko. So really strong hazard control. A lot of pieces that are really content being hazard control pieces every week. On the Cleric side, we've got Miltank with Heal Bell. We've got the hazard terrain, or the terrain with the Fini, and we've got an additional Cleric support with the Kaimeko. So really, really strong on both ends. Probably the best one I've seen today. I'm going to give that a 9.5. Eye test. I would have liked to see a better breaker because there isn't any good speed piece that just kind of cleans house. All these pieces need to set up. So I don't see the breaking power, but this team doesn't get broken either. I don't see anything that's going to make this team fall apart. There's a lot of pieces to hold the line with like the Feeny or the Rotom or the Miltank or the Mega Venusaur. So busting this team is going to be difficult, but this team doesn't really push back hard and could be abused by substitutes. So we'll see how they do with that. I'm going to give it a 3.5. Like I said, I think the lack of a breaker concerns me. We're going to skip my team because I can't give it an honest opinion and we're short on time. The New Orleans Ninetales, coached by Tiger. She has the Tornadus, the Zeraora, the Mega Diancie, Skarmory, Swampert, Licky Licky, Tangela, Magmortar, the Galarian Zapdos, the Druddigon, the Whirlipede, and the Karkle. So fire, water, grass. We've got fire on the Magmortar, grass on the Tangela, water on the Swampert. Probably the weakest fire, water, grass core we've seen today. Not the worst. There are usable, but it's really just the Swampert we're going to see a lot of action from this season. Fairy,
Welcome
Dragon,
everyone,
Steel.
it's me, Friendly 1234.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
We need to speed this through very, very much.
Yeah, I've only
10 out of
got
10 on everything. Hazard control is very good. Mega Diancie, Skarmory, Druddigon is a very, and Swampert are very reliable stealth rock setters. Not as much Diancie, but you got the three other rockers to cover it. Double flying with Torrentine and Zapdos is good because Torn covers Defog, which Zapdos does not have. Everything, but Torrentine is your only removal except for fucking Karkle, so that's gonna be a bit problematic. And for
Skarmory
hazards
can
themselves as
defog.
well.
It's not a great
Whirlipede.
defogger, but it can defog.
Oh yeah, Skarm can defog, but I guess you have Mega Diancie, so that doesn't really matter as much.
Yeah.
Uh, that's about it.
All right.
Good cleric and licky licky, good normal for to cover the shits. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Just
Fairy Dragons.
in terms of the eye test, Torrentine, Zeraora, Mega Diancie, very good core.
Here's one. Speed tiers on this team are solid. I don't see any
Speed on the
major
team,
gap.
121, 110, 100. Well, 143,
43 to
121,
121 to
110,
110 to 100.
100, but then
Then
from 100 you go all the way to 83 with Magmortar, which we don't
we
really
do.
respect.
So we're down to basically 70 who we
So
don't respect. We
basically
don't
70,
respect
which
anything below 100 is where we're at with the speed tiers. So that's a concern.
yeah,
Above the top speed tiers, anything at 100 and above, we have to respect. Anything below 100, we don't respect their speed tiers. So that's a concern. Going to give that a 5.
yeah. So base 95s are able to run very, very like modest and
Bulky.
adamant natures.
Yeah.
And as for the eye test, Zeraora, Torrentine, Mega Diancie is an absolutely insane core.
Yeah.
And
it's a top heavy team. Very top heavy.
It's a very top heavy team. I like it. I like Swampert. I like Licky Licky. I like Galarian Zapdos with Mega Diancie and Torrentine to destroy the steel types.
My only
And
concern is that the only piece on
Zeraora.
the bottom that shows up with any reliability is Galarian Zapdos. Nothing else on the bottom shows up reliably, with maybe Druddigon having the next most
Well,
appearances.
Druddigon shows up reliably. Magmortar has some good matchups. I've used Tangela a lot, and it actually does come more reliably than you would think. It's very like it
This
really
team's gonna get
covers the
smacked by
ground types
knockoff though.
for.
Like there's no knockoff
Yeah.
Cobra on this team. So like having 3 Eviolite
I
users with
mean,
no
there is
knockoff,
Diancie, I guess.
but it's not a good switch in if it's a good
It's not a good
physical
switch in
attacker.
though, yeah.
So the team's going to be pressured by knockoff a lot, which is going to be concerning for all its Eviolite
Okay, so for the
users.
overall eye test, I would give it an 8.5. I don't know. Oh wait, no, it's not a 5. I would give it like a 4. I don't know about you.
I'm going to give it a
4, 3.
I'm going to give it a 3.5. I'm near, but I'm not.
All right, last team, Exter's team. Go, 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 go.
All right, Edster coach or the Melbourne Reshiram's. We've got
the Melbourne Reshiram's with Mega Metachem, Clefable, Spectrier, Blissey, Zarude, Vaporeon, Noivern, Fortress, Toxtricity, Rhydon, Typhlosion, and Mr. Rhyme. Hazards themselves, Clefable, Blissey, and Rhydon, and Fortress, I guess, but
Fortress is a good hazard setter.
More like,
I mean, when he's showing
it's a good hazard setter, but it's also there for removal on your team because your only removals, skipping to that, are Noivern and Fortress. That's it, and Mr. Rhyme, I guess.
Yeah,
but
Noivern is going to be overly pressured as Noivern is going to be overly pressured as a hazard removal option on this team.
And Fortress is just going to be very pressured for hazard control in general. As for the type chart, go back to the team.
Fire, water, grass. Not Typhlosion is not really that respectable with fire.
Typhlosion is not really like a fire. But the water grass core is very good with Zarude Vaporeon, especially because Vaporeon's a pretty good cleric. This team has a lot of clerics, which is actually really good because all of them get momentum. 2 of them teleport and then flip turn. So you can run like Assault Vest sets with Vaporeon, Calm Mind sets with Clefable, and Blissey
Yeah,
does not have to run Wish every week. So I actually like the triple cleric on this team, especially with Mega Medicham
triple cleric works
and
nicely.
Spectrier.
Yep.
It works actually really nicely because this team hates paralysis. Speaking of paralysis, onto the speed tiers, Spectrier 130, 105, 123 Noivern, 105 Zarude, 100 Mega Medicham, 100 Typhlosion, but we don't respect that. And then straight from that to 75 with Toxtricity, so that's a
Yeah,
bit
it's a
concerning.
huge
But
gap.
over,
There's nothing in the
basically,
95 to 80 range that needs to run excessive speed other than to outpace the toxicity. That's the only thing they have to outpace
mhm.
below. So that's going to be an issue. I'm going to give it a 6.5. Hazards we established are actually pretty solid on this team. Really good hazard play. Honestly, I'm going to give that a full
So
5
I'd
out of
give it like
5.
a,
It's got everything.
I'd
I mean,
give it a 4.5,
we've
but
got
yeah.
rocks on 2 mon, 3 mons, 4 mons. We've got T spikes. We've got spikes. I really like the hazard play on this team. This team is going to be. I'll give it a 4.5. Some of them aren't that great.
Wait, this team doesn't have a grounded poison, does it? This team doesn't have a grounded poison, does it? Or
Toxicity.
like a poison at all?
Toxicity.
Oh yeah, Toxtricity.
Yeah.
My bad.
Hazard control is really problematic. Cleric is best cleric team, one of the worst hazard control teams. Probably a 6.5 because hazard control is so bad that you're going to be overly reliant on your clerics. Eye test,
Mm-hmm.
really good breakers. I think the last 3 mons are garbage. I don't think they do anything for this team, but the rest of the team is really scary. Pivots really nicely into Spectrier and Mega Medicham, so they break really nicely because we've got 2 teleporters, we got a U-turner, we got a flip turner, we got another U-turner, we got a volt switchers. So Mega Medicham's going to be getting a lot of opportunities to break things on this team. So I think that's going to pass nicely for it. I'm going to give it a 4. I wish they would clean up their bottom pieces, and it might be like a 4.5 or a 5. So,
And if you have the time, go back to Bankler's team because that is actually completely different now.
Bankler's changed his entire. I don't have time. I'll give Bankler a
You don't
personal
have time, okay, yeah.
I'll give him a personal
Understandable.
redo if he wants to get an opinion on his new team. But I'm going to have to call it there. Thank you
Mm-hmm.
to Frandy and Joshua for
Yep, okay,
participating. I'll
yeah,
post the
I just
rankings
came
on the
here like
channel.
last minute to I came back here last minute to just speed things up because I can talk really fast. It runs on the family. um go visit my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Frandy1234. Okay, bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.